So you want to hold Republicans responsible for Ingracia, but not for Mamdani?
Quote unquote, I was on a Nazi streak.
Globalize the Intifada. We just saw it in Australia, brother. If you can't condemn it today, and if you can't get moral clarity on globalizing the Intifada today, you've got a problem.
Progressive host Adam Mockler appeared on Abby Phillips' show to face off against far-right MAGA operative Scott Jennings, widely viewed as one of the most extreme voices in that movement, as the panel, which included Mockler, Jennings, and others, debated the growing MAGA civil war and the issue of racism inside the movement, a discussion that quickly turned intense and confrontational. And I will also share my own commentary on what unfolded, so let's break it all down together.
Tonight, we are getting a fresh glimpse into the deep divisions that are splintering President Trump's MAGA coalition. There is bitter infighting that exploded at that Turning Point USA annual convention over the weekend, and it exposed some serious rifts over things like conspiracy theories, bigotry, anti-Semitism, and extremist views. Some of MAGA's biggest stars threw jabs at each other, including Ben Shapiro, who called out his fellow right-wing podcaster Tucker Carlson over his interview with outspoken white nationalist and Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes.
The conservative movement is also in danger from charlatans who claim to speak in the name of principle, but actually traffic in conspiracism and dishonesty. And the people who refuse to condemn Candace's truly vicious attacks, and some of them are speaking here, are guilty of cowardice. He knew that Nick Fuentes is an evil troll, and that building him up is an act of moral imbecility. And that is precisely what Tucker Carlson did.
Carlson wasn't too happy with that, while other MAGA heavyweights were quick to take sides.
To hear calls for deplatforming and denouncing people at a Charlie Kirk event, I'm like, what? This is hilarious.
Let's face it, Ben Shapiro is the farthest thing from MAGA. Ben Shapiro is like a cancer, and that cancer spreads.
I found it kind of funny that Ben thinks he has the power to decide who gets excommunicated from the conservative movement.
Vice President J.D. Vance also took the stage on the final day of the conference, and he addressed this friction head on.
I didn't bring a list of conservatives to denounce or to deplatform. I know some of you are discouraged by the infighting over any number of issues. Don't be discouraged. Wouldn't you rather lead a movement of free thinkers who sometimes disagree than a bunch of drones who take their orders from George Soros?
So fundamentally, this is about whether or not there should be boundaries to the conservative movement, Scott. And there are all kinds of other issues, and I will get to some of them, including the rift over Israel, which is a part of this. But really what Megyn Kelly is saying, what Tucker Carlson is saying, what Steve Bannon is saying, is that no one should say who's in or out. Is that really what some people believe in the conservative movement right now?
Well, it depends on who they're talking about. I mean, they obviously have a disagreement with Ben Shapiro about certain things. I think it goes to the Israel issue when it comes to Ben. Ultimately, it'll be up to the nominee of the party in 28 to sort of build his own coalition, which is why J.D. Vance's positioning here is important. I will just note that, for all the talk of rift, if you look at the straw poll results that they took among the 30,000 people who were there, 87% of them said that Israel was either our top ally or an ally of the United States. Only 13% said no. And the number one issue facing the United States, according to the respondents, was radical Islam. And so there seemed to be actually not that much of a rift when it came to the audience. There may have been some fighting among personalities on stage, but there was pretty clear-eyed view of being able to tell the difference between who our friends and our enemies are among the attendees.
But I mean, should there be boundaries? Should someone be able to go up on that stage and say, if you believe these things, you are not part of our movement?
Well, look, my personal view is that this was an event. It's the first big rally since Charlie got murdered. And specifically what Candace has been doing, terrorizing a grieving widow for the last several months with conspiracy theories, some of them wrapped up in this whole Israel nonsense, is nothing short of despicable. And I think Ben was right to call that out. I didn't hear Ben calling for the excommunication or the deplatforming of anyone, but I do think it's more than reasonable to say, what kind of a movement allows someone in whose job is to monetize the grief of a widow after she had to witness her husband and the leader of this organization get murdered? I think that's more than in bounds for him to talk about, look, we're a political party and a political movement. we're not a sponge. You don't have to absorb everything that oozes in under the door. I think that was Ben's point. And look, everybody's going to have a right to say whatever they want. It's not about free speech. It's about what sort of speech you want to be identified with. I, for one, don't really want to be identified with someone who is terrorizing a grieving widow.
Yeah, and we'll get to how Vance plays into this, because you mentioned it. But the New York Times wrote this: in the depths of these Republican divisions has been obscured by two things: shared affection for Trump and a shared revulsion at the left. But Trump is no longer on the ballot, and there's increased alarm over the new right. These two factors are working together to shrink the Republican tent.
Yeah, you said J.D. Vance.
Before we get into what Adam Mockler had to say, I just want to make a few points about the first part of this segment. First off, the MAGA civil war is incredible. Watching the worst people in the country tear each other apart is, in my opinion, fantastic. I love the MAGA civil war. Then there's Scott Jennings, Mr. Disingenuous himself. We'll get into him in a moment, but he talks about Candace Owens monetizing the grief of a widow. Let's unpack that. Yes, Candace Owens is making money from the fallout of what happened with Charlie Kirk, but Erica Kirk, the widow? Talk about monetizing grief. She's the one coming out with fire and sparklers shooting off the stage, in leather pants, doing interviews and town halls with CBS. Who's really profiting from this grief? Also, consider the people attending a Talking Points USA event. These aren't average voters who maybe liked some Trump policies, they're the hardcore of the hardcore. And Scott Jennings claims their number one concern is radical Islam, not healthcare costs or other everyday issues in the U.S. So, we're talking about radicals watching a bunch of radicals speak, which of course Scott Jennings praises. But things really get interesting as the clip continues.
His opinion is important. He has had no moral clarity about any of this division whatsoever. He refused to condemn the Young Republican group chat when it came out a few months ago. They were talking about gas chambers. He's refused to condemn Paul Ingrassia. He's refused to directly combat the Groyper movement growing. I just think it's like my entire life, Republicans have been targeting minority group after minority group. Conservatives have been getting rich and gaining power off of this, targeting immigrants, targeting LGBTQ people, women, it's been Somalis, Haitians, but the second that certain MAGA commentators are now the subject of this exact type of bigotry, they have a stunning amount of moral clarity about it. Vivek Ramaswamy only had moral clarity when anti-Indian American hatred was being spread. Republican Representative Randy Fine has a lot of moral clarity about bigotry when it's against him, but the way that he talks about Zohran Mamdani, the way he talks about Ilhan Omar is incredibly contradictory. You can't just stop bigotry from entering your movements when it's hitting you. You have to stop it at the door. This is not courageous for people to speak out. It is self-preservation at this point.
You brought up Mamdani. Do you believe that Mamdani has shown any moral clarity when it comes to Israel and the attacks on
the day
Jews?
After he was elected, there was a swastika. Let me finish. There was a swastika drawn on a window, and he immediately tweeted out and condemned it. There is no equivocation between the way. There is no equivalent between the way Zohran and J.D. Vance have conducted themselves. So today, do you think J.D. Vance should condemn Nick Fuentes? Should J.D. Vance condemn the Groypers?
He has. He told him he could eat SHIT. That's
not on stage. One. He didn't do it on stage in front of the Groypers.
Today, Mamdani got asked, there are people on your transition team who have said it's okay to kill Jews after October the 7th. And he said, we have a diversity of political opinion. I think to throw Mamdani in with J.D. Vance is a huge reach. Mamdani has been the opposite of morally clear on.
Are you joking, J.D. Vance?
Let me ask you this, because I think
very much not joking.
This is actually to Adam's point. If you are willing to condemn, if you're willing to condemn Mamdani for what you just described, again, why would you not condemn conservatives for doing effectively the same thing when you have people like, Nick Fuentes who are out there?
Are you questioning me about what I've had to say about anti-Semitism and who should be?
You need clarity about people like Paul Ingrassia.
I'm questioning you about whether you're willing to apply the same principle to Mamdani that you would apply to people in your own party. Are you willing to do that?
I have repeatedly on this show said anti-Semitism has no place in our political discourse, and we don't need to be associated with it.
So for the people like J.D. Vance who say, we have a lot of different viewpoints in the Republican tent, and who am I to say who is in and who is not? He just mentioned the Republican group chat, and that was effectively J.D. Vance's point, which is that these are just boys. Boys will be boys. Yeah. They're just young men. We're not going to denounce them. We're not going to denounce them over little mistakes. Are you okay with that?
J.D. Vance is going to have ample opportunity to lead this
coalition.
No,
but I'm asking about you.
Wait, do you think J.D. Vance should condemn
I'm asking about you. Are you okay with that?
Everybody,
just in the same way that
continue
you
the
are
beatings
not
and then I'll
okay
answer.
with Mamdani. That's what I'm at. I get that J.D. Vance is J.D. Vance, but I'm wondering about you. What's the principle that you apply to J.D. Vance, and is it the same as what you're applying to Mamdani?
Well, I don't put them anywhere near in the same universe. A, B. Look, it is up to us as conservatives to decide who we want to be associated with. I can assure you, we do not want to be associated in any way, shape, or form with Nick Fuentes or anybody approximating what he has to say. Period. Full stop. It will destroy us if we do it.
I wish J.D. Vance would say the same thing.
Tim.
I was going to say, I completely agree. There's been several leaders in the conservative movement who've pushed back on all these talking points about anti-Semitism, and I will completely agree with Scott. There is no place in the conservative movement or in the Republican Party, for that matter, for anti-Semitism or any of those things. I do find it ironic, though, that you compare the vice president, who has, in fact, your litmus test was that he went on Twitter and you just said the vice president didn't condemn something from the stage. The vice president condemned the group chat. We've talked about this on this show, and you guys are completely.
He called
this.
He called.
Wait a second. You said, let me finish earlier. Let me finish.
Okay.
You said that
Tim,
the
we've
vice
talked about
president.
this on this
we
show,
did, and you guys are mischaracterizing the statements that the vice president made. He absolutely came out and condemned and said that there is no place for any comments like that in the Republican Party.
J.D. Vance said he's going to warn his kids so some quote-unquote scumbag doesn't leak a group chat in a similar way. He was implying the person who leaked the group chat was a scumbag. J.D. Vance has had the farthest thing from moral clarity this entire time. And listen, do you know who Paul Ingrassia is?
Sure.
Do you know who Paul Ingrassia is?
Yeah, we've debated it.
Do you know what? Okay, so do you know what Paul Ingrassia said?
Yeah, we've debated it.
That he has a Nazi streak. Oh, you've debated it, but has Trump fired him or is he still a part of the administration?
I don't know where he is right now.
He's a part of the administration, and you know that. You're lying right now. You know that he is a part of the administration. He is still there, and he said he, quote, has a Nazi streak. So you can sit there and play coy, but you are not having the clarity that you are talking about right now. Do you condemn Paul Ingrassia?
I certainly condemn anything.
Should Trump fire Paul Ingrassia?
Approximating having a Nazi streak.
The Republicans just have a problem. I would say the Democratic Party has a problem as well. Whenever you coddle bigots, it's going to come back to haunt you. And so Republicans do definitely have a decision to make, whether or not, having free speech is one thing, but coddling people who would cradle bigotry, nurse bigotry, stand up and clap for bigotry, that is a problem. And so now, because the fractions within the Republican Party, which there are some in the Democratic Party too, are having this fight, because the promise was that President Donald J. Trump was going to change the material conditions of working class people in the United States of America, and that heretofore has not happened in a way that gives people the relief that they need. And so now you have these people fighting. But bigots are going to bigot. And so leaders have a responsibility. Is Vice President J.D. Vance going to be the vice president for everybody or for certain people?
And I think that, let me just make one point, because I think what Nina is saying is correct. You and many other Republicans, lambasted Democrats for years over allowing actually some anti-Semitism into their party. And now you have Republicans seemingly making the same mistake. Megyn Kelly responded to Ben Shapiro and his criticism of anti-Semites who are associated with Republicans. And she said, Ben is Israel first. She said she understands that Shapiro would consider such a charge anti-Semitic. And she says, and I'm sorry, but his behavior has proven that charge to be correct. Why would you divide the American conservative movement, which was gelling, which was becoming much more cohesive for a moment after Charlie died, over Israel?
Well,
so she's basically saying, let's let them all in, because we were just starting to get a groove together, as opposed to saying it's not okay.
Well, first of all, Ben didn't actually bring up Israel in his speech. It wasn't really about.
She brought it up.
It wasn't really about Israel. So that's number one. Number two, you're very interested in Ingrassia, who I'm only vaguely familiar with and have never met.
He said he's on a Nazi streak, or he had a Nazi streak.
But we're all familiar with Mamdani. So I'll ask you a similar question. Do you agree with the phrase globalize the Intifada?
No.
Okay, so do you condemn Zohran Mamdani for his failure to condemn people who go around chanting this at his rallies and events?
It's a false equivalence.
Oh, is it? So you want to hold Republicans responsible for Ingrassia, but not for Mamdani?
"Quote unquote," I was on a Nazi streak.
Globalize the Intifada. We just saw in Australia, brother. If you can't condemn it today,
Adam Mockler goes on Abby Phillips' show and he's one of the best progressive guests they have because he doesn't take any nonsense from clowns like Scott Jennings, saying things exactly as they are, which really gets under Jennings' skin, and it's great to watch. We see this over and over with Scott Jennings on Abby Phillips' show. His only move is whataboutism, never admitting the problems MAGA has with racism, anti-Semitism, and other forms of bigotry. Instead, he deflects with "what about" arguments, like in this case, "what about Mamdani?" I usually agree with Nina Turner when she's on shows like this, but she's right that the left doesn't have the same bigotry issues as the right. The right often labels the left as anti-Semitic, while the left is critical of Israel's government, not Jewish people. Part of the deep divide within MAGA that Abby Phillips' show highlights is that many Republicans and MAGA supporters no longer fully support Israel's government, and people like Scott Jennings, who are all in on Israel, don't like that. Even pundits and hosts like Megyn Kelly, who are starting to criticize Israel, realize that to keep their audience and make money, they can't remain Israel first. Candace Owens has already figured this out, running circles around everyone else in viewership and earnings on YouTube. So with Scott Jennings, we shouldn't expect anything beyond whataboutism. He'll never examine his own party and admit its problems. He claims MAGA won't defend someone like Nick Fuentes who went to the White House, yet he fights tooth and nail for J.D. Vance, another questionable figure, and as Adam Mockler points out, he didn't denounce the people in that group chat. That's MAGA's base, and they won't denounce them. Let me know what you think about the MAGA civil war, what Scott Jennings said, and what Adam Mockler had to say on Abby Phillips' show, and make sure to give a like and subscribe.